Are you a woodworker who's looking for ideas on projects that will sell, that'll help pay for your hobby? If so, you're in luck. Because in this video, I'm going to show you how to make this simple address sign for your house or for anyone's house. It should sell really well, easy to make. So let's get started. Now, before we get into the actual build, I just want to show you what these sell for on Etsy. So I'm here in Etsy. I found this very, very similar design. They look like they're using pine, stained pine with maybe a polyurethane coating. They offer a couple different options here, different stain colors. One's black, different amounts of numbers. They even give you the dimensions, 12 by 15, a little bit different from the size we're going to make, but very similar to the size we're making. These are priced at, with one number, which probably isn't all that common, $136. Two numbers, $148. Three numbers, $159, $4, $170, $5, $182, and they can do the box only for 102 at 16 wide, a box only for 96 at 12 inches wide. Now, I can tell you this takes less than one 8-foot 1x4 to make, and the numbers aren't all that expensive. I believe I paid around $5 per number. Now, to validate whether or not these sell, if you're not familiar with Etsy, there's a few ways to do it. One, when it says there's only 7 left and 13 in carts, that's a good sign that people actually want this item. So that's sign number one. You can also tell by the number of reviews. There's 403 reviews for this, so obviously at least 403 people bought this item, but not everybody reviews, so it's probably significantly more than that. The other way we can validate a product is by using a product called Everbee. Now, this is something that it's a plugin that you can put into your web browser, such as Chrome, and it runs in the background, and it will tell you more things about this listing in regards to how it sells. So all we got to do is hit this Analyze Listing button right here, and it's going to give me an estimated monthly sales, and it says there's 30 of them sold a month, so that's not too bad. They estimate the revenue at $2,800 a month. Now, I would say that that revenue is probably, they're basing it on the cheapest price option, which is that $96, so that's probably 30 times 96. If we did 30 times 159, like what we're going to make right now, it's significantly more, like 4,500-ish. So that's a good sign. That's a very good sign that these things sell. If you wanted to validate more, you could dig into other house number signs and see what Everbee projects them to be sold as, or how many they project to sell. We're not going to take the time to do that. I would highly recommend, before making something, get this Everbee tool. I will put a link down in the description for this. They have a free version. You have a certain amount of searches a month. I use the paid version because I tend to search for things a lot more, and I was running into that number. It might be 10 searches a month, and then I was done for the rest of the month. So it's a very low fee. But anyways, I'll put a link down in the description that will get you to the Everbee site and get you going. And aside from that, let's just get into that build and see exactly how we're going to make it. But this is a good sign. Now, I'm working with red cedar on this project. It's a good outdoor wood. You can use other types of woods. You could use a pressure-treated pine. You could use red cedar, redwood. Those are some of the more common outdoor types of woods. Now, my front porch, this will never see the weather, so it really probably wouldn't have mattered what kind of wood I would have used on this, because it's not going to decay, it's not going to rot. But I just had some cedar laying around from some previous projects and thought it would be a good use of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm cutting all these pieces to length here for the back. Now, I determined by measuring my house the size I wanted, and that was going to be 14 inches tall on my back. And I was going to just glue these together into a panel just because I didn't have a piece wide enough. I was going to make the entire back 14 by 14. So that's going to take 4 pieces of this 1x4 material to get the 14 inches across. And so that's what I did first. And then we're going to just glue those 4 pieces into the panel. Now, it's important when gluing to use an exterior rated wood glue if this item is going to see any kind of weather. It's just actually a good idea regardless. I don't know how much humidity and things like that can come into play on something that sits outside. I would just recommend using an exterior rated wood glue. Again, like I said, mine is under the porch, so it won't see rain and snow and things like that, but I still use that just in case. I scraped the glue off before it was completely hard, just to make things easier to clean these up and get them flattened out. After I did that, was hoping to actually plane these on my planer, but my planer only goes to 13 inches, and this board is 14 inches wide. So I had to opt for sanding. So I got my sander out. I sanded 80 grit and then 120 grit and got it really smooth. Now, I didn't worry a whole lot about the backside because you're never going to see it. It's going to lay against a brick wall, so it might not lay completely flat anyways because of the brick. So I really wasn't all that worried about that backside. Next, I cut the front, the sides, and the bottom for the plant holder area that's going to go on the front of this. I just made sure that this extended out the entire way to the end of the width of the sign, which is 14 inches, and I made it extend away from the wall 3.5 inches. The reason I chose that was then I didn't have to cut the bottom at all to width. I could just use a normal 3.5 inch board, which is a 1x4, and it would fit perfectly. So I just would have to cut that to length. So it just made things a little more simple. Now it's time to prepare for assembly. Now, if you've watched any of my videos in the past, you'll know I hate when fasteners show. So I do everything I can to hide fasteners. So for this, I opted to use pocket hole screws. Now, because of the tight space that was going to be inside of this area, I couldn't use pocket hole screws everywhere. So what I chose to do was pocket hole the sides to the front and then pocket hole the bottom to the front and to the sides. So now I have an almost complete area for the plants to go. I just have to put it up against the back, which we just glued up. So for the back, I just decided you're never going to see these screws, so let's just screw through the back and have it attach the whole front plant area with those screws. So it was fairly simple. The only way you could see the pocket hole screws is if you saw down inside of where the plants are going to go, and nobody's going to look in there. So we were able to hide all fasteners very easily. Now, the numbers I purchased came with templates inside, and these are for mounting them because what it is like a raised number that has posts behind it, so it stands off of the board you're mounting it to. And so I had to trim up the number 1. We're going to put a 107 for our house number on this sign. And so I trimmed them up. I taped all 3 numbers together so that I could get good spacing. And then I spaced those numbers out on the actual sign so that they were where I wanted them. I taped them all down to the sign. And then I got a center punch and just marked where the center of each hole went and then drilled them out. After I was done with that, I decided not to mount the numbers yet because I wanted to stain this. So we're going to hold off on those numbers. We're going to get some stain out and put the finish on that I wanted, and then we'll do the numbers last. Next, I got an exterior rated stain out. Now, this is made by Cabot. Its color is honey teak. I've used it in some other projects around my house. I like how it looks, and so I chose to do that. I thought it would provide a nice contrast and color to go with the black numbers that are going to go on the sign. So I brushed that on and let it dry, and then we were ready to put the numbers on. Now it's time to put the numbers on. Now with these numbers, all you really have to do is you screw the post in the back of the number, and then it has a spacer, and then it has like a ridged post at the other end that gets pounded into the board, and it kind of has like grips that will hold it so it doesn't come off. Now, I'm not sure why. Maybe it's due to the fact that these are intended to be used just on a wall without a board behind it. But the part that gets pounded into the board for these was actually like an inch long, and I'm only working with 3/4 inch thick pieces of wood here. So what ends up happening is they extend out the back, and I really didn't want those to extend out the back because it's going to be up against the brick wall in my house. So I pound these in, and when I do this, I'm careful not to mar up the finish of the numbers. So I cover it with a towel, tap them in, and I try to make sure I also tap right above each post so I'm not going to bend the numbers. But getting back to these posts that extend out the back, I decided to get an angle grinder out and grind those off. Now, I didn't show you that in here because you may never encounter this problem, but I did have to do that for mine so that it didn't push it away from the wall. One other thing I did was I put some like D-ring hangers on the back of this to hang this from the wall. There's several ways you could do hang things like this. A lot of times I'll use a keyhole slot in the back. I didn't really want to get into the router today when I was making this, and so I just decided to screw on a couple of those D-ring hangers. They work really well, and you really wouldn't notice them that much anyways, and it looked fine. It hung really good. It's easier to get your screws lined up, and so I just thought it was simpler to do. Next, we actually went to Hobby Lobby. Now, I need to say before we get into this, I have zero experience working with this type of stuff, so I was learning as I went. But I got this green foam stuff that you can stick these plants in. I don't know what it's called. Somebody out there I'm sure does and is probably laughing at me right now. But I tried cutting it with a utility knife. It didn't work, so I got a little saw out and sawed right through it. I actually thought about going to the table saw, but I thought it'd make more of a mess than I wanted to deal with. So once I did that, I placed it in the area. It was not really easily seen, especially at the height I was hanging it, so that worked out well. And it fit almost the whole way to the end, so that also worked out well. The only other thing I really needed to do was to stick these plants in. Now, the stems were a little bit too long to go down in. I thought it kind of looked a little dumb, and so I just trimmed the stems off to a good length to where it didn't stick out too far. It looked like the plant was growing right out of the base, and it kind of, the shorter I made it, the more it covered up that green foam stuff. So all in all, it turned out pretty good, even though I didn't even know what the heck I was doing. So that is my disclaimer on this. And if you think it doesn't look good and I chose the wrong plants, you're probably right. But I thought it turned out okay. So that's all we really needed to do. One other thing I should mention is sometimes some of these plant stems had wires in them, so you may need some kind of snips instead of just a knife. It was not cutting through a few of them. So snips seem to work a little bit better. Just a little pro tip there from the not pro when it comes to this stuff. So here you have it. Now, I'm not going to profess to know what kind of plants to put in here to make it look good. That's not my specialty. I grabbed these. I thought it would look fine, and I think it looks okay. But if you want to use something different, definitely want to feel free to do that. So we're going to hang this on the house right now and see how it looks. And there you can see it hangs really nice, looks really good, and is a really nice accent piece to a home. This project, like I said earlier, is really easy to make.
And one of the reasons it will sell well is because everyone needs one. Everyone needs a house number, or most people do. And the other thing is, there are professionals out there who will look for these type of items as gifts for their clients. So think of people like realtors, or maybe a mortgage broker, insurance agent maybe. Now I know that these professionals will buy these for their clients because my wife is a realtor and I've been around the industry enough to know they're always looking for good housewarming gifts for when a client buys a house from them. So it was easy to make. It looks pretty good, and I think you can make it too. Thanks for joining us. Check these videos out on the next screen, and we'll catch you next time.